Okay, good morning. Still morning, right? Okay, everybody. It's really nice to see you all here today. I thought, I think Jurgen mentioned, sometimes the dots connect backwards, right? So what you sort of see here is some of the work that I did recently, which was more really about just getting the whole of society together to really what we call give our best for others. But I thought what I would do is actually just tell a little bit of the story of like, well, how did we get there actually, and what are some of those dots that connect going back 10, 20 years? Because I remember, in fact, and this is what I wanted to encourage you all, that actually about 20 plus years ago, actually too, I was sitting in a room that's not too dissimilar to this in Singapore. And it was at an Imagine Singapore event, believe it or not, and it was actually also doing something which was trying to express what our dreams were, about the future. And I thought, at the time I thought, wow, this is really crazy. It doesn't look or feel like this at all. Singaporeans were so kiasu, right? But what was possible then and what became what is now, I think was birthed in a room very much like this with people very much like you. So I just do want to encourage you that those dreams do come true. Like I mentioned, the topic that I have really is the power to serve. And just to let you know, so I come from my mother is Japanese American, my dad is Indonesian, Chinese, I'm Singaporean. And people always ask me, where are you from, right? And I said, oh, okay, well, actually, I'm like, oh no, where are you really from? And then I decided I'm not going to determine, where I'm from by where I, whether people accept me or not. I'm going to determine where I'm from by where I choose to serve. And so, if I'm in the United States, I will choose to serve there. If I'm in Singapore, I will also choose to serve, in Singapore. If I'm in Cambodia, I hope I can serve you, too, when I'm here. So, I come from a business family, so my business family all expected me to run a multi-million-dollar business. I'm a super nerd, so my professors all expected me to go on and get doctorates and do teaching and things like that too. But my journey has largely been in the space of public service, and I think, as Jacqueline mentioned earlier too, the focus is not so much about, there is the doing good, but the being, the who we are, is actually at the core of all of this, and being clear also about like the purpose that we want. So after many decades of doing many different things, I think I've kind of clarified what are three purposes. The purpose of power is to serve. If I have the opportunity, if I have the resources, if I have the network, if I have the capabilities, I serve. Secondly, the purpose of life, and I apologize for the typo, is genuine friendship. That actually we can love and be loved, actually. This is really what is most meaningful in life. And the third is the purpose of leaders is to raise other leaders. What we have to do as leaders is raise other leaders. That should be our job. So I thought, let's take this back into sort of three little examples, and I'll be fast because I know we're a little pressed for time. And the first one was almost right out of school. I started a leadership education initiative, as if I knew anything, but it was strangely quite successful, I suppose, because it was quite novel. At the time, nobody expected us to teach leadership to youth, and this was in the 90s, and then I went on to work at some schools, and one of the things that we did, which was so powerful for me, was when the school, we got together and we said, let's ask the students, what is a major conflict actually in the world? We wanted to learn about how to build peace, We said, what is a major conflict in the world and what can we do about it? And so the students discussed and said, what, actually, at that time, actually the Indo-Pak conflict actually was one of those major issues, and there was sort of nuclear escalation, sort of feels like where we are right now, right? And the students said, what, let's try and do something about it. And we thought, who are we? We're Singapore. Actually, we're nothing. We're nobody, But maybe what we could do is we could invite 20 young Indians and 20 young Pakistanis together in a third place, because they cannot meet in their own countries, right? In a third place, and we would go through a camp, like a process to have them get to know each other, and to perhaps wash away, some, or at least expose them to some of the untruths even too about what and maybe the burdens in a way too of their history, and say, hey, actually, it's true, all these things have happened, and it has been such a scar and such a deep wound, in many of our societies and families even too, but how is it that we start building our future like stronger together, And it was amazing to see how these two kids, some from India, some from Pakistan, were able to come together. They discovered they like the same music, they enjoy the same songs. Actually, their food is very similar, oops, I've got to move on. And really to realize that actually world peace begins by just building relationships one at a time. Second was actually in a mentoring community that we started, which was like a big sister, little sister program. And what we really wanted to do was actually just tell young girls in particular, that they're, even if you experience poverty or you have run into trouble, your family has run into trouble with the law, that there is still hope. And we do that, again, by building friendships, by building relationships with them. And somebody asked me one day, why do you care? This is not even your people. And I just thought to him, I said, what are you talking about? Your people, my people. Actually, we are all just one people, isn't it? And so I thought, actually, I just resolved in my heart that actually we must care, even if it's unreasonable, to other people, too. And another one was working when I was involved with the business side of things, too, with migrant workers. A lot of migrant workers come to Singapore to work, but what we don't see in Singapore is sometimes the ways that they come to Singapore, which is through labor brokers and even labor trafficking kinds of situations. And we always say, oh, it's because they're a poor country, or is there a problem? But actually it's not. It's because we allow it. Because we don't do it differently, from the employers. And so one of the things that we decided to do there too was clean up and say, let's do a proper, transparent, ethical recruitment process, and make sure that every worker that comes to Singapore doesn't pay these kinds of fees and actually gets the proper integration and welcome, into our country, like we are welcoming other guests to our hotel. So this then brought us down to then eventually, I guess, about, how many years ago, less than a decade ago, working on this idea of, well, what can we do for Singapore? So this is in a school, this is in a company, this is in, in the community, but what could we do as a country, actually too? And we came up with this idea of, maybe there's a new strategy for Singapore where people, leaders, and organizations would come together to do the things you cannot do alone. If you can do it alone, go ahead. But to come together to do something that you cannot do alone. And what would you do? You would give your best, not your scraps, not your half effort, but your best for others, not just yourself. Because because at the time I was thinking, let's think about it. What is Singapore famous for? Food, shopping, kiasu. I was like, oh my goodness, this is the story that people think about us as a country. I thought, oh my goodness, this is kind of terrible. Kiasu, if you don't know the Hokkien language, means afraid to lose. And if you're afraid to lose, you will defend and you will make sure that you take first. So that other people don't take first. You take first. That kind of attitude is terrible, right? And then, what does the world know about us? Crazy Rich Asians, which is also translated into I don't know how many different other languages. And I thought, oh my goodness, what kind of story are we telling? Because the truth is, and change requires us to also face the truth, right? The truth is that there is also a dark side. That actually there are many, many ways in which, there is greed above need, and since this is an Oxfam inequality sort of report. There is very much a what's in it for me versus a what's in it for you. We always think what's in it for ourselves, kind of thing first. Then we also think, because we're so addicted to productivity and efficiency and doing the right, doing things faster, better, cheaper, all this, that actually if you don't have use, then you don't have value. You are worthless. But what happens? I got a picture this morning and it broke my heart. My grandmother, who's 103 and usually very, very strong and vital, is lying in bed and just looking terrible right now. And I just think, what? Can she do anything? Is she of any use to anybody at this point? No. But does that mean she has no worth? No, she's one of the most valuable people in my life, right? But how do we think about that, right? Then in society, do we really think about, what it is that we can do to respond to a situation, or do we think, hey, something goes wrong, who's to blame? Who is wrong and what do we do about it, right? These are all kinds of aspects, not just of Singapore society, but they were strong also in Singapore society. And over COVID, of course, we saw this horrible, horrible loneliness and isolation that people, felt in society too. It was older people, it was youth, it was all these things. And we live in an interconnected system. We cannot just see them in different parts. So we need to find a way to overcome, that sense of me first. It's about me, what's in it for me, take it first, before somebody else takes it, to actually think of ourselves as an ecosystem. And so that's what the whole City of Good strategy is actually about, is how people, leaders, and organizations come together to give our best for others. And so other-centeredness is the key. And I don't really have time to go into the strategy, but there were basically pieces that focus on national events like Giving Week and awards and telling stories about local heroes and things like that. And that was the people of good, to remind ourselves who we are. Then there was a leaders section, which was about, people like you, crossing boundaries, building bridges, going beyond, in your own spheres actually to do things that are good for society. And then the organizations part, which was really very much around businesses and what businesses can do. And we had wonderful support from Sequoia actually too, on working on a company initiative there to bring together all the companies to help them not just put this into society, but actually put it into how we do business actually too, because how we do business matters. It's not just about make a lot of money and then you do it the wrong way and then give a bunch of money away on the other side. Let's make our money in the right way actually too. And it's good for us. So let me just encourage you all that it is the power to serve. I wish you all genuine friendships. I hope that you are in touch with one another in 20 years and doing amazing things together. And I hope that you, from today until then, will also raise more new leaders. That's my house, just to say. It's quite colorful. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Beautiful.